What is going on YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the debut album by Ariana Grande. Basically, this album is called Yours Truly, and it came out in the late summer of 2013. Now, Ariana Grande was a part of the show called Victorious, the show or movie called Victorious, and she worked on that for a while, and she was getting ready to break into the music industry and that type of stuff. And the initial single that she had to do that was called Put Your Hearts Up, which came out in December of 2011 or so. And basically that had like a more bubblegum pop kind of direction. But the thing about it is Ari didn't really care terribly much for that song. It wasn't the direction that she wanted to go in. So I didn't know about that song. I haven't listened to it yet. I don't know the direction of Put Your Hearts Up, but it is something to check out if you didn't wholesomely know about it. But I would have to say this album very much has like a 90s kind of R&B type feel towards it. It also has some 1950s piano pop and some doo-wop kind of feels about it. But definitely reminds me of something that Mariah Carey would have done like in 1993 or 1995, something like that. Just those typical kind of R&B folks. Not quite TLC, but definitely in the same vibe of like some of the stuff that you would have heard out of 90s R&B as far as that kind of goes. It has a lot of good context of 90s R&B, especially in like the singles and stuff. It's definitely kind of the thing about it. So it's an interesting little package of a project just because it kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, it's been kind of said, I'm not for certain if folks thought that Ariana Grande was like an industry plant, but it just was kind of interesting enough that she just kind of spawned out of nowhere. It just kind of randomly happened, and I just remember when I remember this project coming out in 2013. When I remember this project coming out in 2013, it just kind of happened, and then that was just kind of instant the way that that kind of went. But I look after this, it's a pretty solid project. I definitely say it's going to get a pretty rave score. I like this. This is an excellent debut, and it just really did an excellent job of like R&B and stuff. I would almost say that Ariana Grande is like the 2010s version of what Mariah Carey was back in the early and mid 90s and stuff. She definitely had a pretty good run for a good while. It's too bad that Ariana Grande has taken such a break from doing music recently because there was some good stuff just between like 2013 to about 2020, just the way that sort of stuff kind of happened. Great debut, just great feels about it. This is a compact kind of album, has Mac Miller, has some good collaborators on here like Big Sean and Mac Miller and other folks. So I'm just going to kind of look after it, just being able to say that, yeah, this was a pretty excellent debut. Just real kind of state-of-the-art kind of R&B as far as that kind of goes. I just look after it like it definitely did some damage for what it did. I mean, it's interesting just because this album, despite the fact that it was kind of 90s pitched, kind of had like some good kind of dance cuts on here, but it's just kind of the concept. There's a lot of piano type stuff on here, so it definitely reminds me of like just more presentable and just kind of a lot more like, I'm trying to think of the word for it, just kind of more user-friendly R&B. I feel like this is just a lot more of like kind of like cleaner R&B, I would definitely have to say, where you look after it, it's not like synthy club bops and kind of more like crunchy kind of EDM prone type stuff that was kind of popular 2012 2013. I would have to say that even Mariah Carey kind of had more of like a more edge to it. I feel like Ariana Grande is more of like the kind of tapioca version of what Taylor Swift is to country, and that's just kind of the same situation. Ariana Grande is like, yeah, I would say Ariana Grande is pretty clean as a whistle when it comes to this sort of R&B. It's just interesting because, you know, it's been a while since I've listened to this album, but the more I look after it, it is, you know, when you compare like Ariana Grande to like Iggy Azalea, or you compare her to like Rihanna or like Adele or someone like that, or when you compare Ariana Grande to folks like Rihanna and Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera and Tinashe and some of those R&B mistresses that were kind of around that time. It just kind of has like a different pitch towards it. Like I said, she's just pretty, I mean, she didn't want to be bubblegum pop, but I definitely feel like she's pretty like light compared. I don't want to say full-blown lightweight because she's a quality singer, but I look after this is pretty light R&B compared to some of the stuff that you'll find. It's kind of the concept. It's just more kind of like, I don't feel like this album is pop. Like, you know, and you could look after, some folks would say, well, it's not R&B, it's pop, but it actually is more R&B. And I look at the concept, just the pitches and the tone of it. This is definitely a soul project, but this is kind of more of like like 2 or 3 shades lighter than the stuff Mariah Carey would do in that sort of concept. This is kind of the thing, but I do like it. It's definitely a good quality here. It's just the fact that she's, you know, she seems kind of like shy and like meek compared to some of the R&B records that you'll typically kind of hear. So that's kind of the thing. But so there's 3 singles on this project. I kind of feel like me talking about like these 3. I do like these songs. Yeah, like I was saying, I liked all 3 of the singles. They're all pretty instant hits. The first single is "The Way" with Mac Miller on there. The first single is "The Way" with Mac Miller. This is a very Mariah Carey like R&B piano cut, just very 90s like, and it has like a retro ballroom type style. I would definitely have to say about it. It's just a kind of vintage kind of dance room cut as far as that kind of goes. I mean, it's not so much like a nightclub. I mean, I suppose just by the great sample, this is the sort of stuff that like Notorious B.I.G., Mariah Carey, folks like that, TLC would kind of do with this, like those good samples that you would hear, just vintage kind of stuff. This really feels ripped out of 1994 or 1996 or something. Some other folks like Toni Braxton, I feel like that's probably something Toni Braxton would do if she were in more of her up-tempo kind of cuts as far as that kind of goes. But it just kind of, I mean, it's pretty much like a vintage kind of 90s oriented type song, but I look after it, it's just kind of retro and like the way that the dance style of it kind of is. It can be a dance cut, but it's just kind of a lot more like not so much uppity kind of shake your ass in the club kind of stuff that like Usher or T-Pain or Trey Songz would kind of do in that sort of sense. But like I said, this is just a lot more kind of lighter tone kind of R&B, but it is a good single. Mac Miller does a great job on here. Mac Miller suits this song pretty well. He suits the chemistry with Ariana Grande rather well, so it's a good concept. Just overall easy kind of tone for Mac Miller and Ariana Grande as far as this song kind of went. Baby I is the next single. That's the second single here. Baby I is the second single. This is a very 90s like R&B dance cut. It's bop-ish and has an electro type feel about it. It's a comfortable track and it's just a mid-tempo dance. This one's definitely the more kind of presentable and more kind of contemporary sounding R&B type cut compared to The Way and Right There, which both of those songs are way more Mariah Carey and 90s like. But I do like, I mean, it fits that Ariana Grande kind of has some Mariah Carey type style. It definitely fits. But this one's just kind of more contemporary, more circa 2013, 2012 type stuff as far as that kind of goes. Definitely like the tone of that. Real melodic vocals on here. It's just a real presentable kind of song. I mean, this one, Baby I was a good follow-up to The Way. I didn't realize that The Way was like a top 10 single from Yours Truly, but it charted pretty high. It was a good debut for Ari, and I would have to say Baby I is another nice one. This kind of pretty solid kind of reception that it got. Hit like the 20s of the Billboard 100. Yeah, Baby I charted pretty highly. It hit like the 20s of like the Billboard 100, so it was a pretty good follow-up bop to like The Way as far as that kind of went. So that was a nice one. But the third single was Right There, and this is like a throwback kind of Mariah Carey like mid-tempo groove. Definitely is like a mid-pace ballad, and it's kind of a minor dance bop, I would have to say. This is another one that's just very similar to The Way, both of which kind of have like very eerily kind of like this cadence with Mariah Carey type tones as far as that kind of goes. Just some good mid-tempo groove, and it's kind of like I was saying, this is kind of like a ballad, but it's not so much like a typical kind of ballad, just in a more daydreaming type atmosphere as far as that kind of goes, just kind of ruminating type feel. It's a very mid-pace where it can kind of be like a minor dance type bop, and Big Sean suits this song pretty well. Would have to say this is another good concept of getting some of these, just kind of like, yeah, it's very much a mid-pace kind of song. I think that's just kind of the concept about it. It's the same thing with The Way, where The Way was just kind of more retro kind of style just in the orientation behind it, but it does have some jive towards it, just in a more kind of throwback. I mean, I think it's 90s throwback, but I think it could be throwback even further than that, just because the sample probably goes further back than the 90s. But I just look after it, both The Way and Right There are two good throwback 90s type style mid-tempo kind of grooves about them. That's kind of the thing. All 3 good looks for Ari. Just would definitely have to say that they kind of had that sort of pitch and good kickoff to like the songs that she did. It makes me wonder about the initial song that she did. That was Put Your Hearts Up. I really wonder about what that song's kind of about, because I don't know. I mean, sometimes like musicians will not like a song, and like, the folks who buy, the consumers who purchase the music think completely the opposite. That's kind of what happens with Eminem. So I mean, I like Ariana Grande, but I question if songs that she hates. I mean, it's not like I would be abstract to be just like contrary to her, but just kind of the concept. I just wonder if she hates the song, whether or not I would full blown hate it. Just just looking at the concept as to whether or not this would be something to poke fun at Ariana Grande about, whether or not this song is actually that bad. But I just think it may not be. That's just kind of the thing about it. But I just look after it. So there's 12 songs on this album, and I wound up recommending to you 8. So I'll go ahead and point out those 8 songs. So those 8 songs I recommend would be The Way, Baby I, Right There, You'll Never Know, Lovin' It, Popular Song, Better Left Unsaid, and Daydreamin'. So basically, Daydreamin' is a ruminating R&B type tune. It's a frivolous kind of summer house sitting kind of malaise type bop. I just kind of feel like this one's not so much of like a dance type tone like a lot of the songs, or at least half the songs on this album kind of are, but I do like the concept of getting this one just because it's not really so much of like a jive and kind of more social kind of tune. It's just kind of more of like a relaxed kind of ruminating type feel as far as that kind of goes. So I just look after it like it's just kind of a more relaxed kind of ruminating type tone. So it's definitely one if you're not trying to get turned up, but you just want something more to kick back to. This is a good example of one to kind of do that. It just has the good melodies and kind of enough pep about it to really have some good times, despite the fact that it's not really like a jive song. Another highlight is Better Left Unsaid. This is a romantic kind of slow dance cut, and it's a mini EDM bop, and it's definitely some makeshift R&B. I feel like this song is kind of makeshift just in the sense of when you get off work and that type of stuff, just a standard kind of car tune for just day-to-day and kind of daily living type stuff. But then I also feel like in the verses of this song, it's kind of a romantic kind of slow dance type feel about it, where it's just very kind of more sultry and like a romantic kind of tone, just kind of in the concept of just some slow dance, this kind of gazing kind of tone as far as that kind of goes. But in the chorus, it kind of switches into like a mini EDM type bop as far as that kind of goes. So it's just kind of a good blend of just doing that, just kind of being blue collar and makeshift, but then also kind of having like some romantic tinged in a way of also being dance oriented. So there's a good chunk of songs on here that really have some dance vibes. I feel like definitely Baby I, You'll Never Know, Lovin' It, and Better Left Unsaid all kind of have that concept. But then I would also say the other 2 singles, The Way and Right There, are some good ones. They're just more 90s tones. So that's a good concept about it. A real kind of commercial song on here that's really surprising about it is Popular Song. So this is like a very much commercial kind of super pop cut, and it's very bop-ish, and it feels pretty distinctly like shopping mall music. It's very chic. It's just very chic-like, I would have to say. I definitely like the concept behind it. It's just very much one, like Ariana Grande, it didn't seem like she did an overabundance of shopping mall music, kind of like Justin Bieber did, and maybe other folks. I can't really think of who else besides Justin Bieber, but it's just definitely the concept that Ari just very briefly did a song with Mika on here, and then that was just basically kind of it, and that's just kind of the concept about it. It's just very much this is the most commercial song on here. When Ari said that she didn't want to do bubblegum pop, this is a good example of something that very much is bubblegum pop. It's pretty much like the most kind of bubble yum kind of bubblegum pop that there is on this album. But I do like the concept. It's not really soul or 90s oriented, but it is a pretty hit song. It's just very much like a pretty straightforward and just like tapioca kind of like pop kind of song, but I do like it. It's a good one. Lovin' It's another throwback song. This is another one that's kind of similar to some Mariah Carey type stuff. I do like that tone as far as that kind of goes. It's a throwback, kind of mid-pace, kind of day commute, kind of malaise about it. It's a minor dance song, and it kind of has some sunny vibes about it. This is a very sunny album. Like, I feel like a lot of songs on this album are just very sunny, and it just doesn't have that kind of ruminating and kind of like a murky kind of feel, but it's not like it needs to. I already started to get that later on with, there was an album I reviewed called like, Thank You Next, and there's an album I reviewed by Ari called Thank You Next that had like a darker tone, but this one's just very sunny skies as far as that kind of goes. I do like this song. Loving is just a real kind of quick pace kind of tune as far as that kind of goes, just up there with The Way and Baby I and the singles. This pretty much could have been the 4th single, I think, if Ari had pushed this album a little bit more. Definitely a good highlight for that sort of concept. And then You'll Never Know. And then You'll Never Know is kind of a bickering dance floor cut. It's some bright pop, kind of another sunny type song like I was saying before with like Lovin' It. It's kind of an electro kind of feel, and it has some nice jive about it. This is definitely one of the more contemporary oriented type ones like Baby I, You'll Never Know is a nice one for that. Loving It's another nice one for that. And Better Left Unsaid is kind of a nice one. It's a little bit kind of slow pace, but it's another nice one for that. So those are just some good ones. There is some good dance bops and jives from Ari. There's kind of a lot more vanilla. I feel like that's kind of the concept. That's a good word that I was looking for to describe this project. That's a good concept to describe this project that I was looking for, is that this project is basically very vanilla when it comes to these dance songs. Like I would almost say tapioca. Like vanilla is almost maybe a little bit too strong a word in terms of like what needs to happen. Or vanilla is almost a little bit too not strong enough a word to describe these songs. This is definitely more tapioca when it comes to that. But I just would have to say it's good music. It is kind of the concept that she's just such a lightweight when you compare her to like Britney Spears, or even, yeah, I think even Demi Lovato is probably a little bit more kind of, it has a little bit more edgy a sound and just tougher sound than Ariana Grande kind of does. But it's just kind of the concept just about it. Miley Cyrus definitely does. So just folks like that you would get. So it's just kind of the thing. Very tapioca, but I like it. I like this particular project. So that's kind of the thing. So talk about some of the songs I didn't enjoy, which would be the 4 songs I don't recommend, which would just be Honeymoon Avenue, Tattooed Heart, Piano, and Almost Is Never Enough. Like I feel like Almost Is Never Enough and Piano and Tattooed Heart are all just kind of more of like ballad type songs that just don't have the pitch that well. I know obviously with this album being more 90s oriented, I think the pitch of some of these type ballad type songs is just trying to be more of like, I mean, a lot of these songs are kind of more homely. Like I feel like Piano is just a more homely kind of song that just kind of had like an awkward sense of where to listen to it. Just really felt like this kind of, like besides homely, just looking after just very much residential and just kind of like not, I would almost say house cleaning music, but just looking at the concept is just very regular sounding and just kind of like, you know, standard living. So it just didn't have like a lot of pitch as far as stepping out in that sort of sense. It's the same thing with Almost Is Never Enough. That was kind of a lengthier song that just kind of felt more ballad-esque. Honeymoon Avenue is kind of one that was kind of more soulful. This is definitely a soulful kind of one, but I couldn't quite vibe as much with that one. Honeymoon Avenue is just more of a comprised kind of R&B cut that just didn't have like the tinge that it needed to. I just feel like when Ariana Grande has a little bit more jive about her, I mean, she can do more songs like it, but it's kind of, I feel like pulling off more songs like Daydreamin' and Better Left Unsaid just didn't quite happen enough. Those songs were good, but they didn't quite, were not as nailed as much when the tempo was kind of altered and kind of in just different tones. But it was just kind of more patchy as far as when Ari was able to nail those type songs. Like Tattooed Heart really wasn't it either. That was kind of another one that just kind of was more daydreaming type sound, but just didn't quite have the pitch as far as pulling it off quite as well. It's just kind of a, it's definitely a saucy and kind of more romantic kind of one, but just the tone of it just didn't quite fit as well. So that's kind of the thing. But still, I like this album quite a bit. So me liking 8 songs out of 12, this album's going to get a 9 out of 10. I feel like the social score, I'm going to give like an 8.25. The social score is going to get an 8.25 because it did have some jive on here. And I feel like it's some good orientation of that. Definitely good songs for stepping out, like Baby I, You'll Never Know, Better Left Unsaid. There's definitely some good songs on here for a romantic sense as far as stepping out and kind of more dance oriented, like Popular Song, Better Left Unsaid, You'll Never Know, Loving It, Right There, Baby I, some of those type ones. This is definitely over half the album, but I look after it like the singles definitely hit, but this is kind of before Ariana Grande started hitting #1 like that. So it's kind of like these are good songs, but I still kind of feel like most of this album kind of feels almost secondary, except for maybe the exception of The Way with Mac Miller. Most of this album kind of feels secondary just because these were just kind of more R&B chart heavy type songs. So they're good, but they're just kind of, they don't have the flash of like later albums like My Everything and like Dangerous Woman and some of those records. She definitely would continue to hone her style a lot further later on. That's this kind of thing. But these are just good songs, but the pitch behind them, and between the fact that not all the songs on here, so between the songs kind of feeling secondary on this album, apart from like The Way, I mean, not in terms of quality, but just in terms of like the reception they kind of received. And then on top of that, like the kind of more down tempo kind of songs that just didn't quite have as much. I mean, they had some pitch, but not always did it hit the nail on the head. I kind of feel like this album, just, you know, in terms of the social score, it just gets an 8.25 out of 10. That's still pretty solid. It's definitely good. It has some jive on here. Definitely a good concept about it. This is kind of very much like a tapioca kind of white pudding kind of. This project is very much like a tapioca kind of white as pudding kind of aesthetic as far as that kind of goes, just in terms of like the edginess that Ari kind of has. Now she would later develop that style, like I was saying, a lot further with later albums. But this one initially was just pretty much like cream puff kind of like. But I like the concept behind it, and I would have to say, like in terms of the future, like Ari's been kind of quiet. I just look after the concept behind this. Ari's been kind of quiet in recent times, and she was like working on acting or something like that. She's just been kind of more of like an Instagram personality and that type stuff. But I would have to say it's been since like Positions and the Positions Deluxe from 2020, 2021 and stuff since she's really done anything. But hopefully we'll get some more records. But I am going to start reviewing some more of these. But this is actually a pretty damn excellent debut. There's some good stuff on here, so pay attention.